We've got the tapes thanks to the great work of the Democrats in the House Oversight Committee. Donald Trump is panicking as Democrats in the House Oversight Committee have got their hands on new photos inside Jeffrey Epstein's home on the despicable island, and they've got videos of it as well. I mean, these videos and photos are absolutely creepy as it kind of tore the area. It has like dental chairs, bizarre statues. And the outside area is just a sight to behold in these videos. Meanwhile, you have Democratic lawmakers reaching out to Attorney General Pam Bondi. They just sent a letter and said, "All right, December 19th, that's when the files are going to be released, right? Right? Tell us what you're going to do because we don't want to have December 19th come around and then you raise all of these objections and you claim that, oh, it's not lawful to turn this over and that over." And by the way, Trump could have turned these over without the law being passed. Let's be very clear about that. And separately, there is a House oversight subpoena that's been out and pending for a very long time. I think you see the formation of the plan right now from these MAGA Republicans based on what Kash Patel said yesterday. Let's just play that quickly.
Anything given his past. Mr. Director, our viewers also are just, they're chomping at the bit on why it took the Epstein files so long to be released. Any regrets there? Was that an unforced error? Just should we have gotten them out earlier? Just get them all out there? Just thought I'd give you a chance to react to that.
Yeah, look, this FBI has produced 40,000 pages of documents to Congress. To put that in comparison, Wray put out 13,000 in 7 years, and Comey put out 3,000. We're committed to transparency. We're putting out as much as we can that is lawful and that is not prohibited by court orders. And those are the things the DOJ is fighting still with judges in court to make sure we can reveal everything without breaking the law. And that's what we're committed to doing. We're doing it as fast as we can, and we're going to keep doing it.
Let's bring in Democratic Congressmember Robert Garcia, the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. And since Congressmember Garcia has been in charge, as the ranking member of the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee, that's where we've gotten all of these emails from the Epstein estate, the videos. I know you've also subpoenaed financial records that you now have. You're going through from JP Morgan Chase and Deutsche Bank. It's obvious what they're doing, right? I mean, like, we're not stupid. I mean, isn't it pretty clear where Trump and the DOJ are going to go, or do you think they're actually going to produce these records?
Well, there's no question that, of course, Donald Trump is leading a cover-up on the Epstein files, and Pam Bondi and the DOJ are taking orders directly from the president. That's our belief. It certainly appears that way, and they have been so committed to not releasing these files after campaigning on them, and now to have all this back and forth and the president fighting the legislation that was on the floor, not responding to our oversight subpoena. So it's pretty clear they don't want the documents released, no matter what Kash Patel or anybody else says. And so we expect them to continue to try to slow or stop our investigation. But we're, of course, focused not just on getting these documents from the DOJ, but we're going anywhere the information exists. So if that is the Epstein estate, which of course helped us release those documents and those emails from a couple of weeks ago, whether it's getting the birthday book that we got, whether it's these new videos and documents, some of these pictures and videos that we received, of course, are new. They've never been seen before. Others have been already released to the public. Financial records that we hope to put out in the next, hopefully, weeks ahead, whatever we're able to produce. This is the work of our committee to get justice for the survivors. And we're going to continue to push forward. And anything that we release, we're going to put out to the public.
Yeah, I mean, I think you putting out the photos today, I think it's important that people can visually see how creepy this island was where the child sex trafficking ring. I think visuals are important to see, like, these were the areas where children were raped. And this was where Epstein would bring these wealthy men as part of the sex trafficking ring that's being covered up. I also thought that you releasing it today is kind of a statement also to your colleagues and others, like, we're not stopping. Like, look what we've got, and we're on the island now. We have eyes on what's happening, and you better be transparent because we're going to get this one way or another. So that was kind of my reading of it as well. But you were the one from the House Dems who released it. What was the strategy?
I think that's exactly right. When we receive something, we're going to put it out. That picture that which I think is the most disturbing one, the dentist chair with the masks, we don't think that photo has ever been seen before. That image of that bizarre room And so when we receive something like that is clearly a place and a space where so many children and women were abused, we need to put that out to the public, even if it's hard to see. And it certainly is disturbing and creepy to see these images. We obviously put out some images today. We're putting out more images and videos as we go through those, and those will be coming out in the days ahead. And what's important at this moment is that the president has the power to release all of the files now and just refuses to do so. And so I think you're right. They're going to continue this cover up. They're going to use some sham investigation to try to get around it. But we will continue fighting to ensure that we release these files and get justice for all the survivors.
I'll tell the editor, just pull the photo up of that dental chair one more time, because I want people to really look at like these masks in there. And, I think that one can reasonably infer that this was a room that was not simply used for dental hygienic work. And when you see the masks there, the scene of horror that victims must have gone through to be put in a chair like that, if that's how that room was used, it's the stuff of nightmares, and it's the stuff that Republicans continue to cover up. I mean, did you ever think that your colleagues on the other side would frankly spend their time not legislating? They were talking about shower heads today or whatever the hell they were talking about, but actually focus their priorities on covering up a child sex trafficking ring.
It's been hard to see Republicans essentially being dragged to support disclosure and supporting the survivors. I mean, you saw the effort in Congress. We only had not even a handful of Republicans initially sign that discharge petition, and it was only until that actual vote came forward that you had all other Republicans break with the president and then begin this wave of support to get those files released. On the Oversight Committee, there has been some areas where Republicans have joined us, but mostly it's been us pushing, it's been us demanding, it's been us forcing votes to get information. This could end today if Donald Trump just released the files, and yet they're refusing to do so. And I think we're going to continue every single day reminding the White House that we are going to get to the bottom of what happened, and all the powerful men that abuse these women and children are going to be held accountable.
It just seems everything that these Republicans in the House, Senate, White House are doing is a cover-up. There's always, I mean, if you just even look at an example like Jack Smith, and I know this isn't, your committee per se, but like Jack Smith, someone is like, yeah, like I want to testify in public. And the Republicans are like, nope, we just want to talk about you on Fox. We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that in public. And just, it seems that everything they do, it's like behind closed doors, and they hide. And it's just like, just let the American people see it. No matter who's on this list, who's in it, just let people see it. I guess on that note too, tell us what else you're focused on the House Oversight Committee, because obviously you've had put a lot of focus here, but there's so many other areas that I know you've been focused on, because there's literally billions of dollars and hundreds of billions of dollars, potentially trillions, that seem to be part of a broader scam that this Trump regime is doing.
Absolutely. I mean, look, obviously the Epstein investigation is incredibly important. I think, we're right now, there's millions and millions of girls and women that are looking at what we're doing and asking. The Epstein investigation is incredibly important. I think, we're
part of a broader scam that this Trump regime is doing.
Absolutely.
Dollars and hundreds of billions of dollars, potentially trillions, that seem to be part of a broader scam that this Trump regime is doing.
Absolutely. I mean, look, obviously the Epstein investigation is incredibly important. I think, we're right now, there's millions and millions of girls and women that are looking at what we're doing and asking themselves, is the government going to cover up abuse of women in our country? And I think that's why that investigation is critical. But broadly speaking, there's so much work ahead of us. I mean, the corruption was happening in DHS and ICE, for example, the loss of due process, not just for people that are here, that are non-citizens, that are working hard, that have no criminal records in most cases, but also for U.S. citizens. We have over 170 U.S. citizens that we know of that have been detained, that were somehow brought in by ICE into a detention center with no due process in many cases. That is horrific and should not be happening to U.S. citizens because they were maybe brown or Hispanic. And so the investigations around ICE are really important. And we're doing hearings and gaining information and doing interviews. We're also right now looking at HHS and the destruction of our vaccine program in this country by Bobby Kennedy, which has been, I think, clear that he is out to radically change our health systems, and we should not stand for that. And of course, broader corruption in the Trump administration. These real estate deals that are happening.
Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Pentagon's announced the U.S. blew up another boat in the Eastern Pacific, killing 4 people. The Pentagon claims the boat was carrying drugs, but once again offered no proof. The U.S. has now killed at least 87 people in 22 strikes on boats since September. This comes as controversy continues to grow over a September 2nd strike when the U.S. targeted and killed 2 men who'd survived an initial attack. 9 were killed in the first strike. On Thursday, members of Congress were shown video of 2 men being killed at a time when they were clinging to the side of their overturned boat for more than 40 minutes. Democratic Representative Jim Hines of Connecticut spoke after watching the video.
What I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. You have 2 individuals in clear distress, without any means of locomotion, with a destroyed vessel, who were killed by the United States.
Lawmakers also questioned Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley, the operations commanding officer. Many questions remain over Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's role. The Washington Post recently reported Hegseth had ordered Pentagon officials to kill everybody on the boat. This comes as the Pentagon's Inspector General's released its report examining Hegseth's sharing of sensitive information about U.S. strikes in Yemen on a Signal group chat earlier this year. The report found Hegseth's actions, quote, created a risk to operational security that could have resulted in failed U.S. mission objectives and potential harm to U.S. pilots, unquote. The report also criticized Hegseth's use of a personal cell phone to conduct official business. Hegseth himself refused to cooperate with the investigation, refusing to hand over his phone or sit for an interview. Israel's military is continuing to pound the Gaza Strip in violation of the October 10th ceasefire. Al Jazeera reports Israeli ships opened fire towards the coast of Khan Yunis while air raids struck the city of Rafah. There are reports of explosions and Israeli artillery fire around Gaza City, including airstrike near the Maghazi refugee camp. Meanwhile, a CNN investigation found the Israeli military fired indiscriminately at starving Palestinians collecting sacks of flour near an aid distribution site near the Zakim crossing in June, then bulldoze their bodies into shallow, unmarked graves, with some bodies left to decompose or be partially eaten by dogs. Gaza officials and the United Nations estimate about 10,000 Palestinians remain missing from Israel's more than 2-year assault, while the official death toll recently passed 70,000. Public broadcasters in Ireland, Slovenia, the Netherlands, and Spain said Thursday they'll boycott the 2026 Eurovision Song Contest after the European Broadcasting Union refused to hold a vote on whether to exclude Israel. This is José Pablo López, president of Spain's national broadcaster.
We maintain the same position we had months ago when we said Israel's participation in the Eurovision Festival was untenable for 2 main reasons. Firstly, because the genocide it has perpetuated in Gaza. As president of the corporation, I keep thinking that Eurovision is a contest, but human rights are not a contest.
Eurovision is among the most popular TV and online events in the world. Last year, viewers from 156 countries cast votes for their favorite contestants. In New Jersey, protesters picketed this morning outside a Jersey City warehouse that's used to transport military cargo to Israel. A recent report by the Palestinian Youth Movement and Progressive International found the warehouse handles over 1,000 tons of Israel-bound military cargo every week, including thousands of Mk-84 2,000-pound bombs that have been used to level Gaza. The U.S. Supreme Court has cleared the way for Texas to use a new congressional map designed to help Republicans pick up as many as 5 House seats next year. A lower court had previously ruled the redistricting plan was unconstitutional because it would likely dilute the political power of Black and Latino voters. Liberal Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan wrote in her dissent, quote, "This court's stay ensures that many Texas citizens, for no good reason, will be placed in electoral districts because of their race. And that result, as this court has pronounced year in and year out, is a violation of the Constitution." We'll have more on that story after headlines. The FBI has arrested a 30-year-old man from Virginia for allegedly planting pipe bombs near the Republican and Democratic National Committee headquarters in January 2021 and the night before the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. The suspect, Brian Cole, is expected to appear in court today. Meanwhile, the Justice Department has asked a judge to re-jail a participant in the January 6th insurrection who'd been pardoned by President Trump. The Justice Department made the request after the man, Taylor Taranto, showed up near the home of Democratic Congressmember Jamie Raskin, who served on the January 6th House Select Committee. Security's been increased for Congressmember Raskin. In October, Taranto was sentenced to time served for making a threat near the home of former President Barack Obama. A federal grand jury in Virginia has declined a second attempt by the Justice Department to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James on charges she lied in her mortgage application. In a statement, Letitia James wrote, "As I have said from the start, the charges against me are baseless. It's time for this unchecked weaponization of our justice system to stop," she said. It's the latest defeat for President Trump's campaign of retribution against his political enemies. The Trump administration is reportedly considering a third attempt to obtain an indictment against James. In New Orleans, about 30 activists were ejected from a city council meeting Thursday after calling for ICE-free zones and asking local leaders to do more to protect immigrants. During a public comment period, members of the public went to the microphone one by one and were cut off when it became clear they wanted to speak on immigration, which wasn't on the formal agenda.
And I'm asking City Council for ICE-free zones, make all city-owned property ICE-free zones, and prohibit ICE and DHS from using city property to stage their operations. No collaboration with ICE. City Council must pass ordinances that codify non-collaboration between the City of New Orleans and ICE, including all of its offices.
As I stated previously, that is not germane. Thank you for your comments.
The protests came as the Border Patrol announced a surge of more than 200 federal immigration agents into New Orleans, which the agency is calling Operation Catahoula Crunch. They aim to make 5,000 arrests over 2 months. We'll go to New Orleans later in the broadcast. Honduran presidential candidate Salvador Nasrallah has alleged fraud after his conservative rival, Nasri Asfoura, regained the lead as election officials continue to tally up votes from Sunday's election. Nasrallah also accused President Trump of interfering in the race by publicly backing Asfoura. Some election officials have also publicly criticized the election process. On Thursday, Marlon Ochoa, who serves on Honduras's National Electoral Council, decried what she called an electoral coup. She said, quote, "I believe there's unanimity among the Honduran people that we're perhaps in the least transparent election in our democratic history," unquote. President Trump welcomed the leaders of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda to Washington, D.C. Thursday for the signing of an agreement aimed at ending decades of conflict in the eastern DRC. Trump also announced the U.S. had agreed to bilateral deals that will open the African nation's reserves of rare earth elements and other minerals to U.S. companies. The signing ceremony was held in the newly renamed Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace. During the event, Trump struggled to keep his eyes open. This follows other recent public appearances where Trump appeared to fall asleep a number of times. And once again, Trump was spotted wearing bandages on his right hand, which appeared bruised and swollen, covered with makeup. That fueled further speculation about the president's health. On Monday, the White House said the results from Trump's recent MRI exam were perfectly normal after Trump was unable to tell reporters aboard Air Force One what part of his body was scanned.
What part of your body thought it was the MRI looking at?
I have no idea. It was just an MRI. What part of the body? It wasn't the brain because I took a cognitive test and I aced it. I got a perfect mark, which you would be incapable of doing. Goodbye, everybody. You too.
In business news, Netflix has announced it'll buy Warner Brothers in a deal worth at least $72 billion. The deal could reshape the entertainment and media industry as it will give Netflix control of Warner's movie and TV studios as well as the HBO Max streaming service. In labor news, a dozen striking Starbucks workers were arrested in New York City Thursday as they blocked the doors to the Empire State Building where Starbucks has a corporate office. Starbucks workers at over 100 stores are on strike. In New Jersey, Democratic Socialist Joel Brooks and Jake Efros have made history after winning election to the Jersey City Council. They're the first socialists elected to public office in New Jersey in over a century. This followed by investigations that
$1 billion a year on the backs of these young girls that and
Since I have spoken directly to you, I have been in the middle of a move. It has been hectic and hairy, and right now I am in a hotel room, and apparently they're doing some construction next door, and that is why you can hear some of the hammering on the wall. But there has been some news in the past week. I hope you all enjoyed your Thanksgiving. There are some new pictures coming out as the House Oversight Committee continues to release the Epstein files. These pictures are dark. They are from inside Epstein's depraved island, but he called Little St. Jeff. And it's in the Virgin Islands. And you got to see the rooms and the house where so much of the depravity happened. You're going to see pictures coming up on this segment with Anderson Cooper. You'll get my take on, what was going on. How does this give us insight into his life, and how important it is that we see these pictures, because seeing is believing when the president of the United States continues to call this a hoax. And as I mentioned on Anderson Cooper, so much of the depravity, so much of the extreme abuse happened on Epstein's island because it was remote. It was hard to get to. You had to get in a helicopter. And then on Anderson Cooper, so much of the depravity, so much of the extreme abuse happened on Epstein's island because it was remote. It was hard to get to. You had to get in a helicopter or a boat. And so many of these girls were trapped there on the island. Virginia wrote about being brutally assaulted on that island. Sarah Ransom, another survivor, tried to swim off. It was so terrible. And there is a very, very aggressive current there. So you'll see there's just things that you wouldn't expect.
I got a Mazzato knife, and what followed was an absolute fiasco. Here's what really pisses me off.
Dentist chair, creepy masks all over the walls. It just paints a world that I think I would be frightened to be a part of. I know I would be if I was the age of the children and young girls that ended up there. So I think it's really important for everyone to see that. Now, the New York Times has a new op-ed out, and they are saying that we shouldn't trust the administration when it comes to the Epstein files. The headline is, let me read it to you. It says, Trump has made the Epstein saga a case study in manipulation. And they're saying what I think so many of us have been thinking. This administration has been lying the entire time about the files. From I have the list on my desk to there is no list, case closed, nothing to see here. President Trump saying it's a hoax after years of manipulation and saying that this, was going to expose the rot in the Democratic Party when suddenly President Trump found out that he would be in the files. There was a real effort to shut it down from the Speaker of the House, the president applying pressure on members of Congress not to vote to release the files. Now, it's up to the Department of Justice and the people who are running it. Pam Bondi, who, again, we can't trust. I mean, she has changed her tune so many times to release the full files. And now that there is this new case that is investigating Democrats, are we going to get the full files, or are they going to say, oh, that interferes with a pending investigation? So, there are a lot of questions right now that we all have about what we're actually going to see, and if those files are going to be mostly redacted and whatever is released is going to be painted to suit an agenda that goes after President Trump's enemies and protects himself and his powerful friends. And actually, the New York Times editorial board says that the Congress should investigate the release of the Epstein files. And I agree with them. But we're 15 days away as of recording this on December 4th from the deadline. So, I'll be pouring through those files. There's about 300 gigabytes. It's a lot. And it will take time. And I think this investigation will last for a very long time if they take it seriously, if Congress takes this seriously. And I hope they do for all of us, because the survivors, especially the survivors, they deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know why over 3 or 4 decades they have been ignored. But yeah, that's why I've been a bit MIA. But I was on a panel yesterday with Reuters explaining my mission, why I started this channel, why I believe in independent journalism, why I'm not timid about the facts, why I chase the story wherever it leads, why I don't have an agenda. I think you are all smart enough to know how to think and how to feel. And I'm just here to dig into stories and to report the facts. And I love having the conversations with all of you. So here is an appearance on Anderson Cooper 360. It is about these Epstein files and what has been revealed. Sarah Fitzpatrick from The Atlantic brought up some really interesting points as well, suggesting that there may have been, evidence tampering on the island, and that what we are seeing is not everything that was there. So stay tuned.
On this, Sarah Fitzpatrick, a staff writer for The Atlantic, an investigative reporter, joins me. Also with me, independent journalist Tara Palmieri, host of the Tara Palmieri Show podcast. Appreciate both of you being with us. Sarah, what do you see as the significance of these images?
I think it's very significant on a couple fronts. One, I think that we are, for the first time, seeing inside of Jeffrey Epstein's home. It's the place where some of the most horrific sex crimes occurred, and some real, criminal conduct. But I think what's important for me as an investigative reporter is that these images we've never seen inside, and they correspond and speak to what so many of the women who were abused on this island, how they described the rooms, how they described the layout. It just gives them additional credibility for the kind of really horrific things that they have described, not just to journalists, but also to members of law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, Virginia Giuffre, who has died, had said that some of the worst abuse she suffered occurred on this island.
Absolutely. It was a place that was hard to get to. You had to get on a helicopter to get to the island, or a boat. It was specifically designed to be a place for pleasure for the powerful and for the weak to be stranded there, to the point that Sarah Ransom, one of the survivors, tried to swim off even though the current is quite severe, and she was willing to risk her life. That was how terrible the experience was on the island. And we know that Virginia was severely raped on this island. I also would have wished that Virginia was alive today. I would have asked her all about that dentist chair and what that meant and what that was, because to me there's something sadistic about it.
It's kind of I mean, it's bizarre to have a dentist chair in somebody's private home.
Also, just no one wants to go to the dentist. There's something dark about it. The masks on the wall. There's a leeriness to it all. It's almost like you're walking through a crime scene. I mean, you are walking through a crime scene. When I see the rooms, they're kind of hotel type rooms, could be for anybody. It has just
there's kind of
energy.
no personality other than sort of creepiness to these things. Otherwise, there is this sort of anonymity to it, of sort of anonymous hotel room somewhere in the Caribbean.
Exactly, and it's interesting. You could even see from the picture of the cameras. I mean, there are cameras everywhere. They're being recorded, you could say, for security, but also what I had heard from the survivors, that they believe that they were always being recorded there. Even the statues are weird, like the one by the pool. And I think it's important for us to have this documentary evidence, especially when you have the President of the United States saying, this is a hoax, it's a hoax. Seeing is believing. See the place where he lived. And this isn't all just some wealth porn. This is a very perverted man, and you can see it from the way that he lived.
Sir, I mean, it is going to be incredible to see what happens with Ghislaine Maxwell, given the interview she gave at Todd Blanche, the weirdness of that interview, and the statements that the president has made repeatedly when asked about this repeatedly, not ruling out automatically. Of course, I would not, pardon or give clemency to a convicted sex offender.
Absolutely. I think that speaks to the fact that there are still so many unanswered questions, but it is a pattern that is so unprecedented in terms of how the Department of Justice normally runs. And I think that speaks to how this case, under multiple administrations, has been just really mishandled, and that has fueled the public interest. And one thing I think that's really important about these photos is that you mentioned that it's kind of creepy and it looks almost sterile. That is because these photos were not taken until well after Epstein had died. This was part of the Virgin Islands investigation. And so there was a lot of time for things to be cleared out, for evidence to be potentially destroyed or altered. And so I think it's important that and that's a really important question that I hope we learn in these Epstein files, whatever comes of them, is it's our understanding that there was really never any law enforcement activity, that there were never leads that could have been followed, that there was never surveillance. There were all sorts of things that my sources wanted to do in early investigations into Jeffrey Epstein that they were prevented from doing, which would have yielded really important evidence. And so I think it's important to know that, yes, these images are there, but these are very sanitized from what could have been.
And Tara, I mean, one of the things that's so, one of the many chapters in this horrific saga is that the people who are now in power, Dan Bongino, Kash, Patel, the FBI, were the ones leading the charge when it was a Democratic administration, and they were portraying this as this is, Democrats and a cabal, and sort of linking it with, QAnon and that whole conspiracy theory. And now that they are the ones in charge, for them to be the ones suddenly changing their tune and saying, oh, there's actually nothing to see, it's just another bizarre element of like, why have they suddenly changed their tune?
It's because they know it's political. And it always was political, but for them it was a Democratic cabal until they woke up and realized that actually at the time when Jeffrey was committing his worst crimes, the president was also a Democrat at that time. And it was a cudgel. They never looked at it in terms of the victims and what it meant for them. And they pulled on the heartstrings of American people, feeling like they were the underdogs not being heard and the powerful elites were getting away with crimes. Turns out they are, but those powerful elites are now in power. So I think, I hope that we find out so much more. I can't believe December 19th it will finally happen, and I hope that they don't use some sort of workarounds with these SDNY investigations to withhold information, selectively choosing what.
Concerning the Jeffrey Epstein files, today the House Oversight Dems, of course not the Republicans, who continue to slow walk any version of transparency to the American people when it comes to the Epstein files. The House Oversight Dems releasing 10 photographs and 4 videos that were in response to a November 18th letter that was served on the United States Virgin Islands Attorney General from House Oversight. And we have a link to them. There are 10 photographs and 4 videos, but I want to get into how they were produced because I think that's equally as important as what was produced. According to the letter dated November 18th to the United States Virgin Islands Attorney General, Department of Justice, in 2020, the USVI Attorney General Denise George filed a law enforcement action against Jeffrey Epstein's estate and 10 Epstein-created entities because of violations of anti-criminal, enterprise, sex trafficking, child exploitation, and fraud laws of the Virgin Islands. A settlement was reached in December of 2022, requiring the defendants to pay the Virgin Islands $105 million in cash, plus 1/2 of the proceeds from the sale of Little St. James. That is the island that is depicted in the photographs and the videos that were produced today by House Oversight Democrats. A separate lawsuit was filed by the USVI against JP Morgan Chase, alleging that that bank facilitated Epstein's sex trafficking venture, not only by banking Epstein, but allowing him to draw $1.75 million in cash for payment to Epstein's victims, and also by banking the victims themselves. A settlement was reached under which JP Morgan Chase paid $75 million to the U.S. Virgin Islands. So, House Oversight said, we request the following documents and information in an unredacted form no later than December 2nd, which was yesterday, concerning the following 3 cases. In re the estate of Jeffrey E. Epstein, which is the estate of Epstein. Number 2, the government of the U.S. Virgin Islands versus the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. That's the one that we talked about just a couple of minutes ago that resulted in the $105 million in cash plus 1/2 of the proceeds from the sale of Little St. James Island. Number 3, the government of the USVI versus JP Morgan Chase. We just talked about. Number 4, all documents and communications relating or referring to any federal or local criminal investigation or potential criminal investigation of Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, that is foundationally how we ended up with what we got today, the 10 photos and 4 videos. Now, we're hearing from a spokesperson for House Oversight who says that these were selected photos and videos by House Oversight Democrats and that there's more. We do know that there are at least 5,000, I want to say. I don't want to double check this to make sure that I'm accurate with the information I provide to you always. There are approximately 5,000 documents that were received in response to subpoenas that were served on JP Morgan Chase and Deutsche Bank for Epstein's financial records by House Oversight. According to Congressman Garcia, those records are being processed and will be released to the public shortly. And again, a spokesperson for House Oversight saying that there's actually more. So let's get it, right? But I want to focus on this because it just goes to show we are on the eve of theoretically getting the entirety of the Epstein files released by the Department of Justice. That would be December 19th, which is in 16 days. And that was because an entire law had to be passed to be able to get it done. But we also know that Donald Trump, in a not so secret way, demanded that Pamela Joe, Attorney General of the United States, more accurately, personal counsel to Donald Trump, that Pamela Joe launch an investigation into Democrats only that are relating to the Epstein files. And we know that she handpicked the Southern District of New York's U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton to be able to do so. We also know that the Epstein Transparency Act, that is a law now, that particular law has baked in restrictions, including but not limited to the idea that if there's an open investigation going on, that certain records can't be produced, i.e., e.g., ergo, the reason why Donald Trump said to Pamela Joe, launch an investigation into the Democrats, thereby trying to stonewall production. But you know what didn't have any restrictions? The freaking subpoena to the Department of Justice that was served back in August, to which the DOJ has only produced a certain limited number of documents, 97% of which, according to Congressman Robert Garcia, were already publicly available documents, either because Ghislaine Maxwell went to her jury trial, and those were a part of the public trial, or they are things that have been a part of civil litigation against Epstein, Maxwell, and others that were not sealed in some way. In other words, the Department of Justice has slow-walked, slow-rolled, created obstacles, thrown up hurdles to produce the Epstein files, despite claiming that they think that we deserve to have all the information. Now, let's get into what was actually produced today. 10 photos and 4 videos. Now, they are depicting bedrooms, or they look like bedrooms. They're also depicting videos of the grounds, the pool, cabana areas, etc. There are no people, no photographs of people. There is a glimpse of a person in a mirror who is actually using the video camera at the time. And you can scour these photographs, you can, magnify them or whatever. There are a few that have redactions, and I noted them. One, which is image, IMG 5261 is redacted, and it's a phone, kind of like an old school phone, and it has like an auto dial directory on the right side, and there are names there. The redactions, according to an aide from House Oversight, were of women's names, and an abundance of caution in the event that those are victims of Jeffrey Epstein. There's another photograph, image 5294, and it's a redaction of what looks like a blackboard. And in order to understand the context of that, you go to image 9221, which is redacted, and it looks like a study or like a large room with a desk and shelves. And there's kind of like a trio of blackboard kind of material on the wall. And that is what image 5294 shows. And it has words like power, deception, political, scribbled on them in someone's handwriting, kind of like in chalk, right? So we're coming into the holidays, and there's a lot of pressure to be able to buy things. 2S, which shows a room with what looks like a dental chair and also a series of random masks of faces on the wall. Look, when you know what happened there, frankly, at the entire island, the entire thing skeeves you out because it's pretty disgusting. But Little St. James was kind of the epicenter of the trafficking of these little girls. It was the island to which Jeffrey Epstein would fly these little girls to be able to abuse them, where Ghislaine Maxwell also was complicit and participated in the abuse. And that is where most of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and others say is the sexual abuse was perpetrated against them. According to the New York Times reporting, these photographs and videos were taken in 2020. So one of the questions that I had was obviously, we have this thing called chain of custody in the law. And I wanted to know, well, who's taking these photographs and who's taking these videos? My presumption is it's law enforcement. Thus, the reason why the United States Virgin Islands Attorney General's Department of Justice had possession of these and turned them over. Now, what's interesting is House Oversight Dems claim that this is the first time anybody's ever seen these particular photos and videos. There is no attendant court order that I have seen that said that these have now been unsealed in some way from the litigation. So to whatever extent they could have been accessed previously or have been or just never been made public, that remains an open question at this time. Again, we don't know who actually scribbled those words on the blackboard, but anyway, that's what ended up happening in terms of what was redacted. And again, the aide from House Oversight stating that the names of women were redacted. And so I'm going to make an assumption that if that's the case, then what's been redacted on the blackboard are the names of some women from there. Now, what's also relevant for you to know is the following. On December 3rd, which is today, a letter was sent from a bipartisan group of United States senators, as well as 2 congressmen, Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna. The senators are Jeffrey Merkley, Ben Ray Lujan, and Lisa Murkowski. The letter is directed to Pamela Joe, and it basically says, look, we are the bipartisan lead sponsors of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. We know that there's a due date coming up for this. In the interest of transparency and clarity on the steps required to faithfully implement this act, we request a briefing either in a classified or unclassified setting to discuss the full contents of this new information in your possession at your convenience, but no later than Friday, December 5th, 2025.
Oldest man ever to be sworn into office in this country. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We have a president who is, of course, the oldest man ever to be sworn into office in this country's long history. And it's showing. Today, he went on a disgusting tirade about Somali immigrants, many of whom are Americans, that even by his own degraded standards was egregiously racist.
Somalia is considered by many to be the worst country on earth. I don't know. I haven't been there. I won't be there anytime soon, I hope. But what Somalia, what the Somalian people have done to Minnesota is not even believable. It's not even believable. And a lot of it starts with the governor. A lot of it starts with Barack Hussein Obama, because that's when people started coming in. And you have to have people come in that are going to love our country, cherish our country. They want to kiss our country goodnight.
There's a lot about that appearance that was both strange and things that we've come to sort of see as normal. You may have noticed Trump kept his hand under the table there. In fact, he appeared to be going out of his way to hide his right hand specifically. That's the same hand that just yesterday was covered with makeup and Band-Aids, the same hand that has had large bruises on it in the past. As for the substance of his remarks, Trump has always been a bigot, going back many decades. He's clearly having a harder time keeping rants like that inside. In fact, today's spectacle comes after a similar tirade yesterday. Also, he's repeating himself a lot. That one was during a cabinet meeting, mostly focused on Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and those pretty clearly unlawful boat strikes, although admittedly, Trump seemed to sleep through quite a bit of it. In fact, at one point, and I think this might be an indelible image of this entire presidency when all is said and done, at one point, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was heaping praise on the great man for his singular leadership, as the man next to him, the president, appeared to be nodding off.
This war is going on, and the president is trying to end it, not because, listen, we got a million things to focus on in the world as a country, but he's the only leader in the world that can help end it. And that's why even as we speak to you now, Steve Woodcock is in Moscow trying to find a way to end this war, to save lives of 9,000 people, Mr. President, as you know, are dying every week.
Have you ever seen a more awake man? A more virile man? A man of more implacable energy than this man here, Mr. President, talking about you. The Washington Post counted a total of 6 minutes where Trump's eyes were closed or he otherwise struggled to stay awake. And so in response, the White House brought out its defenders to explain why everything is fine.
I read this article, like President Trump is slowing down, President Trump's mental capacity. It is 100% fake. That, like, he only called me twice at 2 in the morning last week. instead of 3 times.
You may sleep less than the president, Brad, and that is a remarkable thing because I don't think he sleeps at all.
Fox News even brought out their senior medical analyst to talk about how great naps are.
Social media goes crazy, and the left is going crazy after totally deep-sixing any concern about Biden for 4 years. And they went crazy because at one point today, when Rubio was talking, President Trump had his eyes closed for, a few seconds. It seemed like a few seconds. But they went crazy. Like, he's sleeping during meetings. Like, your reaction tonight?
I think he seems extremely sharp, and I think this whole thing is a bait and switch. This is a disgrace because we don't need to see President Trump passing cognitive tests. As you just said, he passes one every single day, every single moment, going in and out of press conferences. I've never seen anything like it, actually. Oh. Thomas Edison believed in the 10-minute nap, by the way. What would they say? We wouldn't have electricity, right?
Now, I'll level with you here. I, too, am a great believer in naps. I do try to avoid them while I'm on air with you. It goes without saying that the 79-year-old president is no Thomas Edison. Maybe it's just the normal process of aging. I mean, he is, 79. Maybe it's something more. I don't know. We know the president had an MRI a few weeks ago, which he weirdly kind of tangentially introduced and mentioned. It was part of what the White House initially said was his annual physical. In fact, it was his second annual physical of the year. Usually the annual physical happens once a year, at least that we know about. Again, I'm not a doctor. I don't think an MRI is generally part of a normal checkup. And then when asked about it, Trump has been super dodgy.
Did you get an MRI? Can you tell us what that was?
I got an MRI. It was perfect. Yeah. I mean, I gave you the full results. We had an MRI, and in the machine, the whole thing, and it was perfect.
Why did President Trump get an MRI during his recent visit to Wall Street?
Look, as President Trump said, he would inquire with the physicians. I'll check back on that. But as the physical itself stated, Kristen, and as you all know, because you were all witness to it, every single day the president is in optimal physical health.
I had an MRI as part of my standard yearly, or I think they do it every 2 years, but I have the physical every year, and the result was outstanding.
Is it your brain?
Did you know? I have no idea what they analyzed, but whatever they analyzed it well, and they said that I had as good a result as they've ever seen. If you want to have it released, I'll release it.
Yes, please. Can you tell us what they were looking at?
For what, releasing?
No. What part of your body was the MRI looking at?
I have no idea. It was just an MRI. What part of the body? It wasn't the brain because I took a cognitive test and I aced it. I got a perfect mark, which you would be incapable of doing. Goodbye, everybody. You too.
This level of detailed assessment is standard for an executive physical at President Trump's age and confirms that he remains in excellent overall health.
Now, his doctor eventually put out a vague statement saying he was looking at Trump's heart and he is in, quote, excellent health. Trump's doctors also say he's the same height and weight as NFL quarterback Patrick Mahomes, so you could make of that what you will. The president's decline is evident in more than just anecdotal observations. New York Times recently published an extensive account of his truncated schedule and shorter work days. And again, even just watching the guy, which unfortunately for all of us here is our job to do every day, it is obvious that his behavior is becoming increasingly aberrant, strange, and sleepy. He's posting late into the night at one point about 150 times in one stretch, amplifying a post claiming that Nancy Pelosi's staff had been planning the January 6th insurrection for months. Sure, right. He's lashing out at reporters while seeming to be a kind of spectator to his own presidency.
Why do you blame the Biden administration?
Because they let him in. Are you stupid? Are you a stupid person?
The government at the time said that CZ had caused significant harm to U.S. national security, essentially by allowing terrorist groups like Hamas to move millions of dollars around. Why did you pardon him?
Okay, are you ready? I don't know who he is.
Explain more about why you pardoned a notorious drug trafficker.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Juan Fernando.
Well, I was told that I was asked by Honduras.
There's a mic drop moment. Okay, are you ready? No idea who the guy is. Now, at some level, Trump's decline, if it's happening, it seems like it is one of those weird positions of, the food is terrible in such small portions. But the reason all this matters so much is twofold. One, it's hard to believe that this is the person who's actually running the country minute to minute, leaving us to wonder who is filling the power vacuum of the napping president, whose agendas are being implemented, right? And two, Trump's entire source of power, this is crucial, the way that he has kept his second term afloat is through this domineering monopoly on his own party, this kind of ruthless discipline he's imposed on his fellow Republicans. And that only works so long as people in the Republican Party don't start to think too hard about how long he can keep it all going.